Hello again, everybody, and welcome to another edition of the Inside Lowell Daily Pulse, the Wednesday, February 12th edition of the Daily Pulse. I'm your host, 𝗪𝗶𝗺, coming to you from the WellPoint Studios, joined this morning by the head man in charge of the Lowell Public Schools system. School Superintendent Liam Skinner is joining us here for his, what we hope is going to be a monthly visit to catch up on everything happening out there in the Lowell Public Schools and any other silly questions that I want to ask. So,
well,
good morning to
Teddy.
you.
Thank you very much. Delighted to be here. Delighted to have the opportunity to chat. So thanks for having me back.
We're excited to have you here. There's no school committee meeting tonight, but there is a special meeting tomorrow night that we want to talk about. And there's some interesting stuff on last week's agenda that's kind of jibing with a lot of the discourse that's been happening, not just in Lowell, but also around the country. So I'm going to get to all of that with Superintendent Skinner. First, I want to thank our Daily Pulse sponsors. Of course, Real Estate 𝗟𝗶𝗆. He's a licensed realtor in Massachusetts and New Hampshire. He's a certified appraiser in both of those states as well. So if you're looking to buy or sell a home, a business, a commercial property, or if you want one of the above appraised, Real Estate 𝗟𝗡𝗆 is your man. Find him online, realestateravbooten.com. Thank you as well to our friends at WellPoint. WellPoint is the only health plan offering healthcare benefits exclusively to Massachusetts GIC members. At WellPoint, your whole health is their whole point. And by the way, speaking of education, our friends at WellPoint each month like to feature one of the educators in the Lowell Public School District, making a difference day in, day out in the lives of our young students. And look for the Classroom Quarterback feature at the end of the month on InsideLowell.com. We've run, I'd say probably about a dozen of them now since we launched the program in January of 2024. And we got some great people, some really great people working in our Lowell Public Schools. And thank you to our friends at WellPoint first for sponsoring us here in our home, the WellPoint Studios, but also for helping to shine a spotlight on the people who are making a difference in our community and the Lowell Public Schools. And with that, bringing back Superintendent of Schools, Liam Skinner. Lots going on. So I started talking about the Classroom Quarterback. You actually went back to your roots yesterday. You actually went into a classroom. What was that like?
Sure. So yes, Teddy, I was mentioning about, I mentioned about a classroom I was in yesterday, in part because it's still a pretty exciting feature. So being in classrooms for me is not unusual, even for superintendents of schools. I go to classrooms every week, right? Not necessarily every day, but I visit schools every week and oftentimes take the opportunity to be in classrooms. Yesterday was a particular visit. We had what we call Leadership Academy, some principals visiting each other's schools and so on. And I went along with a group of principals at the 𝗪𝗪𝗪 School. So one of the classrooms we visited was Miss Wagner's first grade classroom, and it was just super. So you imagine you walking in, and in this classroom, as we walked in, there are pairs of students, two kids sitting on a bench over in that corner, two students sitting on a rug here, two more at a desk, and so on and so forth. And the students are analyzing some text together, non-fiction, informational text. They have a protocol that they're following, and they're working with each other to read and comprehend that text completely independently. And so the joy in that for me was that this is first grade. It's the kind of education we're seeking to develop in Lowell, where students are engaged. You didn't walk into that classroom and see the teacher at the front of the room talking, all the students listening, or some of them with their heads on the desk. The teacher actually was working with a small group of students who are non-readers, and so she was working separately with them in a different part of the room. How did the teacher get it that these pairs of students knew what to do and were doing it independently? Like, it's a wonderful skill to see when you actually see the whole thing in operation, and you see the students pulling apart the text on their own independently. They are fully engaged. Their minds, their brains are fully engaged in pulling apart that text. It's different from what you and I found, Teddy, in schools where, you sat there and you listened to the teacher, and maybe our brains were engaged and maybe not, right?
Yeah, there's some folks who will argue, well, it worked better back then, and we're going to get into that in a few seconds.
Sure.
But how long has it been since you actually were in that classroom as a teacher?
Oh, I was a teacher until 1994.
Okay, so 30 some odd
yes,
years
yeah,
now,
yeah.
you've been out of the classroom, but you've been involved, you're a principal, so obviously you're in classrooms. And interesting that you say that as superintendent, you still make it a point to get in there once a week and get into a school and a
Right,
classroom.
right. So everything we do, like I guess if the other association I have maybe is with being a central office, right? But everything we do at central office is in service of what happens in our classrooms. Like, that's the whole point, right? That's the whole purpose for us existing as a central office or a district is to support the work that's going on in classrooms, support the teachers, paraprofessionals, and tutors that are working with our students and hopefully they're going to thrive. Yes, a lot has changed since I was a teacher, but I've been in classrooms right through my principalship and even still as superintendent. It's really important to stay engaged in that and stay close to it.
Interesting. So many of that little conversation, which was a sidebar, we hadn't even really planned for that, but that ties into so many of the questions that I have on my list. But let's first start. No meeting tonight. And when we have you coming in on a monthly basis, we're going to try to schedule you for Thursday following a school committee meeting. That's the plan. But we'll look at last week's meeting. But tomorrow night you have a special meeting. Just one item on the agenda of the school committee, and that is to discuss, the agenda says to provide for out-of-district cost for one student. And then it puts a dollar figure in there for one student that's going to some educational collaborative. I didn't fully understand that, and I don't want to give it away, but $51,000 and a few extra thrown in for a tip or whatever. Is that the typical cost for a student who has to go outside of the district to have their special education IEP, individual education plan? Is that a typical cost? $51,000 for one student?
There's no typical cost, and there are no tips, by the way, Teddy.
Okay.
Right?
You don't have to tip the transportation driver or whatever?
No, there's no typical cost. But yes, if a student is going to go to an out-of-district placement, it means that it's a very specialized type of structure that child needs, and it is very costly. $51,000 is a lot of funds but there are cases where it costs much more. I remember years ago. I can't remember the exact, maybe 20 years ago, watching a school committee meeting where one of these came up. And the school committee member said in frustration, we could have bought the kid a house, right? Because in that case, it was hundreds of thousands of dollars, right? Those kinds of costs are not usual, but it can happen.
And is it for 1 year?
Yes.
That 51,000?
Yes.
Okay. Is there a way to bring these in-house? And I'm thinking specifically of the new 𝗟𝗶𝗺 school, formerly the St. John d'Arc school that the city and the schools have bought and are working on. Will that alleviate some of these things, or are you still going to have to send students outside the district?
That's a great question. So the big picture answer, is it possible to bring some of that in-house? Yes, it is. We have right now the 𝗟𝗶𝗺 school. It happens to be in a rented building in Chelmsford at the moment, but it serves students with autism. If we had the capacity, and that school needs to grow, that school is being slated to go to what will be the new 𝗟𝗶𝗺 school, formerly Jeanne d'Arc. That would provide us more space. We could expand that program. If we have seats there beyond what we need, we could bring in students from other districts. We'd be the out-of-district for, Chelmsford or Billerica or whatever.
You'd be the one receiving the $51,000,
yes,
correct?
That's correct.
Okay,
that's correct.
So when you have a student who has special needs or an IEP within the district, is that where we see these costs? Because I've been told to educate the typical student in Lowell Public Schools is $14,000-15,000 a year. That was a couple of years ago, so I don't know if that number went up. But then when you have either special needs or English language learners or whatever, that number jumps to about $20,000 $1,000 a year. Are those numbers in the ballpark?
So the average is between 17 and 18,000 at the moment for a student. That's the average
For every student.
for every student at Lowell Public Schools.
But you've got, what is it, about, I think 2/3 at last check of the Lowell students qualify as some type of English language learner or some type of special need. Was that accurate data?
No, that's high. Our special ed population is roughly 15% of our population are English language learners, maybe in the high 20s or low 30s.
So closer to a 50-50 or 40-60 mix. Okay, but is that, so the cost is $17,000 there. So yeah, this 𝗟𝗶𝗺 school could, in essence, not just pay for itself,
right,
but create and bring in extra revenue for the city that can then be used on other educational programs, right?
Definitely. It would not be the money spinner that we might make it out to be. So first of all, if we talk about all the special education students in our system, the vast majority of them are students that are in regular classrooms with every other child. They may be receiving a special education plan, special needs that they're being met within the regular classroom. The kinds of situations where a student goes out of district are when that child needs pretty intensive or very specialized supports in order to learn. And that's unusual. So if we had space and expertise in town, yes, we could house them, students. But it's also true that some of the services are, it would take quite an effort to develop, and we'd have to find space to develop an enterprise where we could bring into Lowell lots of students from elsewhere.
Yeah, there will always be some level of students that need care that the Lowell Public Schools can't get, or services, I should say.
That's correct.
And whatnot. All right, interesting discussion there. We're chatting with Lowell School Superintendent Liam Skinner. He's joining us here on the Wednesday, February 12th edition of the Daily Pulse. We'll get back to our conversation in a quick moment. Let me just thank our sponsors again: Real Estate Ray Booten, licensed realtor, certified appraiser in Massachusetts and New Hampshire. Find him online, realestaterayBooten.com. Thank you as well to our friends at WellPoint. At WellPoint, your whole health is their whole point. Washington Savings Bank, banking that feels like home. Make the switch now to Washington Savings Bank. TMI Properties, quality and value at every price point. Find your perfect space at TMI. Mahoney Oil, providing warmth and protection to Greater Lowell and Southern New Hampshire since 1925. I was actually chatting with some of the folks at Mahoney Oil yesterday. We're trying to get the Mahoney family in here to talk about 100 years of providing service to Lowell, but also some of the community work that they do behind the scenes. Tremendous family, tremendous organization. Thank you as well to the Greater Lowell Community Foundation, improving the quality of life in Greater Lowell through strategic, impactful philanthropy. Francis E. Preventure Insurance, the agency you can count on and have counted on since 1982. And last but certainly not least, the Massachusetts Pirates, soon to bring all the hard-hitting action and excitement of arena football back to the Mill City. Last year was their first year. Year number 2 kicks off Saturday, March 21st at the Songus Center. We bring back Lowell School Superintendent, Dr. Liam Skinner. A lot of times, do your ears kind of get itchy on Tuesday nights as the city council is talking about a takeover of your facilities maintenance, whether it's at the high school or kind of combining facilities departments that will do all city buildings, which includes close to 30 school facilities at this point, right? Between the schools and offices?
Right. Not at all.
Your ears don't get itchy?
No, I have a very good relationship with the city manager. We work very well together.
It's that Irish thing, right?
Yeah,
You're both Irish,
maybe
and
that's
you get along.
Yeah. And so no, there are no threats there. The more we can collaborate on facilities issues, the better. The vast majority of the needs we're talking about are city concerns and not schools concerns per se. The school buildings might be the facilities that we're talking about, but the city is responsible for most of the work there. We are responsible for basically cleaning, and just regular maintenance on day-to-day basis.
So you, as the leader of the Lowell Public Schools, who has to oversee everything, you don't see a potential issue with turning over some of that maintenance, and I would assume the cleaning would go into it as well, into one facilities department that would be overseen by the city. I'm sure there'd be a point person for the schools, but now it's going to come on under somebody else's control. You don't see any potential issues or challenges with that from a functional standpoint?
That's not been a discussion that we've had, Teddy, so I can't really comment on that. I don't know what people have in mind in that regard. It's not been a conversation I've had with the city so far.
Okay, it'd be nice if they, at some point, if they reach out to you, they keep, because they keep talking about it on Tuesday nights. Let's look outward for a second to Washington, D.C., because there's a lot of talk about every facet of our day-to-day lives, but in particular your field, education. The Trump administration, it was a promise that Donald Trump made when he was running for president, and it's a promise that he apparently intends to follow through on if he can. And that is to eliminate the Department of Education. And he says, pour that money into the states and the districts where it belongs and where it can be better allocated. Detractors will say he's going to gut education funding.
Yeah.
How concerned are you at such a massive change? Because I imagine it will be a massive change, right?
Yes, it would be a massive change. In my opinion, it would be a mistake, although not so much for Massachusetts, not so much of a concern for Massachusetts. So Massachusetts has the best education system in the country. So Massachusetts students score #1 on state assessments. And so for a state like Massachusetts, I think we'll do just fine. I think we'll thrive regardless. I think, though, that there's a great tendency in the United States to individualize and to break things down into, not have the federal government take control, not have the states manage it. And even in the states, farm it out to individual districts. There's at least some need, I believe, for, like, say, for instance, a national curriculum. There should be some things that are common that we have. Those kinds of things are oftentimes not well received in the U.S. We'd lose that if we lose a national Department of Education, federal Department of Education. Again, I don't think it would be a big hit for Massachusetts, provided the savings that they are sent back out to the states for what we need to do in our schools. But I think Massachusetts will do a great job of maintaining our districts and schools, even if the federal government closed the DOE. Other states, poorer states, some southern states and some smaller states might struggle quite a bit, and I think the education quality in those states could diminish greatly.
You correctly highlighted that Massachusetts ranks #1. It was something that Governor Maura Healey was trumpeting, pardon the pun, when that information came out. Here's my question, though. That overall report showed that it's deteriorating. The learning, the reading, the math skills, whatever, are deteriorating nationwide. So does Massachusetts rank #1 even though it's part of a sinking boat? Or is Massachusetts bucking the trend and actually getting better in their scores, whereas the rest of the country is plummeting?
It's a little of both. So in mathematics, Massachusetts has recovered from the pandemic, say, back to more levels that were similar to, say, 2019. But in reading, we've not yet come back all that way. So it's but yes, Massachusetts is the highest in the nation. But even then, we're still struggling to come back from the pandemic in subjects like reading. In mathematics, we've made greater progress.
All right, where does Lowell rank? How is Lowell doing in comparison to the rest of Massachusetts and the rest of the country?
Well, it depends on which students we're looking at. So, we have very much mirrored the state in terms of gains and where the gains have been. So we've done well, relatively well, in mathematics in recent years, and in the past assessment that we had from last spring, we've seen some gains in math. We are seeing less gains in reading, and so that's a similar trend with the state.
You're seeing less gains, or are you seeing a deterioration?
No, I think we're less gains. we can get into this, right? This is something that's a great concern at the school department, and we've been tackling it. We have had a curriculum review recently to look at our curriculum. We believe there are great improvements we can make, and we intend to adopt a new curriculum that we're very hopeful about.
The math scores, I mean, language is a problem when you have to communicate with as many English learners as you have to do. But, you know, math, eventually the skills are the skills, but the reading and the English components, how much does that, the population that you serve, the Lowell Public Schools, so how much does that put you at a disadvantage when you're being compared to other communities in Massachusetts that don't deal with this as much, the non-gateway cities, the more affluent communities where poverty and homelessness isn't necessarily an issue? That has to put a tremendous strain on everyone involved in that classroom, from the students to the teachers to the aides and everyone else.
Very much, very much. It means that our teachers in Lowell oftentimes are doing heroic work, and I'm not saying that it's not the case in other communities that teachers don't do fine work, but our educators in Lowell are just doing remarkable work. They're very much at a disadvantage. It's very much a different game. I maintain, Teddy, that you could take all the MCAS results or state assessment results for all of Massachusetts and rank them from highest to lowest. You could then take every district and town in Massachusetts and rank from the richest to the poorest in terms of, you know, wealth, poverty, and so forth. And those two lists would match up pretty well. They'd match up very, very well. So the higher degree of poverty in a community, the lower achievement scores generally, and it's a very close correlation. So we have a lot of challenges in Lowell due to poverty, due to we have an unfortunate segment of our population who are homeless. We've very many special education cases. We talked about that a little bit. We've very many migrant students and students who don't speak English as a first language. Those are major challenges that our staff and our teachers tackle every day. So
earlier we were chatting about you went into the classroom and it was so different from what you and I are used to, sitting at a desk and
Right.
and the teacher just kind of lecturing, and then we got excited for lunch and recess because we get to get up and run around. That said, there's some folks who say, listen, there's too much effort placed on what I'm going to call kind of like freelancing and learning about other, you know, other things that may not have to deal with the 3 R's, the reading, writing, and arithmetic, as we used to call it. And then folks will say, well, look at your scores. The proof is in the pudding. Our kids are not learning at the level that they used to, or at least they're lagging against other countries, where America used to brag about being #1. Now I thought I saw 24 in the latest rankings. Is there some level of truth to that? Do we need to kind of reinforce the 3 R's?
So the classroom I described being in a classroom yesterday that was very different from what would have been in our day, Teddy, right? And not the traditional instruction, but it's not in any way sort of freelancing. It is incredibly structured. There's an incredible amount of planning and preparation that teacher did when I wasn't around to structure the lesson the way it was, to sort of build the habits and the skills of their students to be able to work in the ways that they were working when I was in that class yesterday. And it was all about the 3 R's. Students were reading, it was first grade, but for first grade, they were reading rigorous nonfiction text. That's reading, after all, and sort of getting into close reading and what they can do to comprehend and make sense of that text and learn from it. And you said something that I champion all the time. The proof is in the pudding. Let's look at the results. I would bet my house on the success of the students in Miss Wagner's class at the McAvenue School, based on what I saw yesterday. Absolutely.
Okay. As we wrap up the talk about the Department of Education, some stats that show between 2000 and 2019, the number of district administrators in the United States rose by nearly 88%. I believe it was 87.6 to be exact. From 2019 to 2023, which was the last data point I saw, it slowed, I think somewhere around 4 or 5% of administrators to student ratio. But that 88% number, that's well, alarming, or does it show how is that number reflected in how the role of the educators has changed between 2020 and 2019, and we had to kind of catch up with some of the special services that are now provided that may not have been in a prior era?
Let me understand that 88%, Teddy. So 88% increase in the number of administrators?
Yeah, in the ratio of administrators to students, or
Wow.
per administrator per student.
Okay.
There's been a significant increase. A ton of administrators hired, and then a cynic would say, well, that money is not going into the classroom. It's not going to the teachers. It's going to some executive office in a school building.
Well, I might be one of those critics, right? So that hasn't happened in Lowell, so I was unaware of that trend. We are not about increasing administrators in Lowell. We're about increasing supports in classrooms, and so that at least it's not occurred on my watch. I think we've got plenty of administrators, sufficient administrators to support the schools, but it's about supporting schools and supporting individual classrooms.
So you have kept the administrators level at a level.
Yes.
Okay, because I remember having this conversation with your predecessor, Dr. Joel Boyd, because at the time he was creating all sorts of new things. I know a new leader likes to set up their organization to reflect their goals and their aims. But, when I asked about it, I said, it's an awful lot of administrators here. Do you need all these? And he said, yes, he justified it as, you need these many administrators to then be able to oversee what's happening down below, was his justification. Were you just lucky in your timing that you came in after all these necessary roles were filled, or do you kind of agree that there maybe shouldn't be as much focus on administration and maybe more on in the classroom?
I'd want to go back and replay the tape to see what was the context that superintendent was talking about. I think that there are arguments you can make, for example, that we might need more social workers, or that we might need more psychologists, or that we might need more coaches. Now, if they are cast as administrators, that wouldn't be an accurate for me, but we don't need any more oversight. We do need more support. Say, for example, professional development, assistance for teachers to grow in their skills and ability. But so if someone made the case for me that we need more staffing at central office, I would question that, and I would say we have to get to what will be the impact in a classroom. There's just no point in growing administration or central office for the sake of it. We don't need help there. What we need is in the schools. There could be an argument for some roles from central office that would support the schools really, really well. I'd be willing to listen to that.
What I was teasing your predecessor about was all the new chiefs that were being
I see.
put into position, and I thought some of the titles were kind of repetitive, and I'm like, well, if you have a human resource office, why do you need a diversity officer? I believe there was a climate change administrator and all this stuff in there. Have you kept all these positions, or have you scaled back on some of these positions?
I'd have to look at that. We don't have a climate administrator. We don't have any of that sort. So I think the answer is that we've not kept them. It happens, again, without being specific to a list, but it happens that a number of those positions were left vacant. And this past spring, when we had, difficult budget scenario, we lost a lot of our ESSER funding at the time. By the way, ESSER funding might explain some of those administrator hires elsewhere that, that during ESSER times when there was a lot of money to spend, you can't hire more teachers for classrooms that don't exist. So right? And so it's possible that across the country that administrators were hired more. But in Lowell, when we had budget cuts to make, we began with reducing vacant positions. And some of the vacant positions were ones like climate specialists and so on. So that went out the door.
So there was a climate specialist. My memory didn't fail.
There was, but it was unfilled, right?
Okay.
And so yeah, we didn't need that.
And so you've now, a lot of those positions you've just eliminated completely from the
we eliminated. Yes, a lot. I want to be specific if we can. We reduced 8 positions from central office in the spring. 8.
Okay. one more national issue that is affecting Lowell Public Schools, because I saw it on your agenda for the meeting back last week, I believe. What's today? Today's the 12th, so it would be the 5th. Your meeting on the 5th, and that was a couple of motions regarding, all right, schools policies regarding ICE immigration, and this fear out there that
Right.
there are ICE agents who are going to be pouring into schools and taking, I don't know, taking kids out, I guess, I don't know, or teachers, who knows. But has an ICE agent ever entered or asked to enter a Lowell Public School, to your knowledge, in the 40 years that you've been there?
Never. No. And so, Ted, it's a very important current concern. It's a real concern. And at the same time, there's a lot of hysteria that's not real. So there's a lot of speculation sometimes on social media. There was some speculation a week or two ago about, they're about to land in Lowell, they're about to go to this institution or the school and so on. That's not, oftentimes that's misinformation or rumor.
And that's harmful, because your kids are dealing with so much as is. We're still trying to recover from the damage done by the pandemic, and now they have to deal with this. And that's kind of what I'm hoping to dispel a little bit with this conversation. Does the fear exist? Yeah.
Right.
Kids are legitimately scared, as are their parents, and it's starting to reflect itself a little bit in attendance. Is that accurate?
We worry about that. We have noticed that our attendance has fallen slightly. We haven't, you need to then get into it and say, which students are we missing? We also have we'd have trouble tracking it, because we don't know our students' immigration status. We don't ask our students' immigration status. Every child that we take in the doors of a Lowell Public School is safe in school, will not be harmed in school. Nobody will have access to them that ought not have access to them. And so, your children are very safe in our schools. But yes, the concern in the community and on the behalf of some folks, the fear might drive some behavior changes, including being worried about sending your child to school.
Yeah, and I fully understand that. I have actually talked to people who are afraid and know people in that situation. But I'd venture to say that perhaps a school might be the safest place for that kid, and maybe that parent even go to as many sporting events and extracurricular activities as you can, because again, while the rhetoric is the rhetoric, I don't foresee ICE agents going into schools. If there's a criminal somewhere else, right, I'd look over my shoulder. But I think the school might be the safest place for these kids and these families, that type of environment.
It's quite unlikely that we'll see ICE agents. If we do, they will not be entering our schools. We will bring them to central office and process them there. There are just the most remote circumstances where somebody would be able to access a school legitimately. They'd have to have what's called a judicial warrant, and that warrant you'd have to examine would be limited in scope. These are extreme circumstances that we don't anticipate. It's also true that the fear is real, that the concern is real, and it's not coming from nowhere. It's coming from new actions at the federal level. In Lowell, students are safe. I like what you said, Ted. I do believe that students are safest and are being nurtured best in our schools. That's the place they should be.
100%. Because even without the ICE scare, those attendance figures, when I see them struggling, and especially in the immediate aftermath of COVID, a lot of these kids don't have that parental supervision at home, or that older sibling that can. So right, they're really left unattended when they're not in a school building from 2 to 5, 6, whatever the case may be. So, again, I encourage parents, get your kids into these school sports or extracurriculars as often as you can, because they're monitored, they're sheltered, which they may not be due to unfortunate circumstances elsewhere. Talk about that cell phone policy, because it was a big safety issue, right? A concern. How my kid's not going to be safe in school. A year later, boy, what was that much to do about nothing? All the consternation over just telling a kid you can't have your cell phone in your hand in the middle of a class.
To some extent, yes. So it's happened that right about the time that we were considering a cell phone policy in Lowell, National Public Radio did a segment on a school in Salem, and they had introduced a cell phone ban 6 weeks prior. And the story basically was it was almost riots, and students complained they weren't going to give up their phones and so on and so forth. 6 weeks later, by the time the radio crew got up to the school and did some interviews, the students themselves were loving it. The students were, this was available for people to listen to online, but students were telling them that they now talk with their classmates. They chat with them in the cafeteria and so on. So yes, the cell phone bans, of course, people feel attached to their phones. Some students are, in fact, sort of clinically addicted to their phones. That's a feature that we have. So it's very, very difficult for students to give up their phones. But when it happens, and if we override that first few days and weeks of anxiety and outbursts, maybe students are better off. And they'll tell you that themselves.
So that happened in Lowell, and that's kind of the sense I'm getting. I don't hear the teachers complaining about it. The first month, it was crazy. My inboxes were filling up, and there was a student who was organizing kind of some opposition to it, and there was some kind of a movement there. And I know that some of the folks on the school committee were starting to get a little itchy and regret the policy. But are we not hearing about it now because there's so many other things to be concerned about? Or are we not hearing about it now because it's no longer that much of an issue, and even the kids themselves, as you said, the Salem kids turned out to like it. Do the Lowell kids like the cell phone policy? Are they benefiting from it?
I've talked to students, and I think they're definitely benefiting from it because, there were times this would happen mostly at the high school where you could enter a classroom, and if you saw a child, talking like this, and they had an earbud in this one and their phone over here, and they were listening to a podcast or listening to, right? Maybe they were listening to Teddy Pals,
hopefully
right?
InsideLowell podcast.
Or more likely they were listening to music or something, right? Or on social media right through a classroom, right? And so those students are now not distracted. They're able to talk with their classmates. They're able to listen to the teacher, and they're actually doing what they're meant to be in that classroom for, and they feel better because of it. I've no doubt about it.
Are you seeing more / better socialization?
Yes,
as a result?
Definitely. We do still, at Lowell High, we do still allow students to use their cell phones in between classrooms and in the cafeteria. Socialization has gotten better, particularly in the classroom, but of course, students are still tempted to be on their phones in the cafeteria when they might otherwise be chatting with their classmate. So we can look at it some more.
So this too is becoming somewhat of a national discussion, and talks about even expanding those cell phone policies, which I don't know how you would do it. I assume middle school kids are not allowed, or
Correct.
Elementary school kids aren't allowed anyway. So if Lowell were to expand it, I mean, you're talking about what you kind of said, cafeteria at lunch or
Sure.
at recess or whatnot. But is that, are you happy kind of leaving well enough alone right now?
I'd be happy to take a look at it again. So there are whole countries that have eliminated cell phones in schools. We're not about to do that in the United States of America, right? But the department...
Is it working in those countries?
Yes.
So it's worth a conversation in America?
It's worth a conversation, but other countries have sort of different cultures and different expectations that the public will accept and so on. I'm not sure that would work in the United States of America. But I think the Department of Education in Massachusetts, Teddy, has encouraged school districts and given some grant funding for school districts to do a little experimenting with cell phone policies. Is it better to have the cell phones be removed when the kid walks into the building for the whole day? Is it better to have them just take their cell phones and put them in a pouch as they walk into a classroom? All these kinds of experiments have been done across Massachusetts. And so it's possible, may or may not happen, but the Massachusetts could issue a policy. They say, well, we want all schools to follow such and such a policy that we think is the best. That hasn't happened yet, but it's possible.
Wouldn't it be nice if, oops, I hit the wrong camera there. Wouldn't that be nice if the state actually took a lead there, and that way
nice.
Lowell wouldn't stick out like a sore thumb with your students? And if Massachusetts just say, hey, we're all doing it, deal with it, get on.
Right.
I mean, I appreciate Lowell sticking its neck out over that, because I do think it's a positive.
It's sticking. It's Lowell sort of being brave about tackling that issue on its own, yes, but it's also a very obvious thing that needed to be tackled. That's, you can't, as a teacher, you've got a classroom of 25 or 30 students, and half of them are on their cell phones. You're not going to be very successful as a teacher. So I think that we had to take some action, and the state knew that, and that's why they're encouraging schools to do that. It would be great if the state came out with a policy that we could all follow, provided we agree and we think it's a sensible policy, right? If they come out with some policy that was disruptive, then of course we wouldn't care for that. But it would be helpful if the state clarified. Sure.
Okay. A couple of quick things before we wrap up. We ran a story last week about a collaboration with the Lowell Police Department in creating a criminal justice careers pathway.
Yes.
For Lowell High students. I know you're always looking at collaborations, be it with Middlesex Community College or UMass Lowell. Also, well, how important are these types of collaborations?
Very. In part because it's one of the great benefits of being in a town like Lowell. We say that you can go from preschool to doctorate in Lowell, in terms of your education. But we have a wealth of talent and knowledge at Middlesex Community College and at UMass Lowell right on our doorstep. So we have students at Lowell High School that get college credit for classes they take in the early college program at Middlesex Community College. We have teachers who receive expert professional development through courses run at UMass Lowell. And there are so many other ideas around collaboration that we could really benefit from. UMass Lowell might, for example, run more courses that they want to run, and we find professional development for our teachers at the same time. So there's a lot of synergies that we can explore and grow, and we're trying to do that.
So that early college program, fascinating, because so I know the students can do it through Middlesex Community College. Are any options available of taking classes directly from UMass Lowell, or is the class thing in Middlesex?
There are options involving UMass Lowell as well. There's sort of dual enrollment and so on. Yes, it's not as well developed, and it's not as large a program as the early colleges.
My cousin's daughter, why I'm familiar with this, my cousin's daughter should be a junior in college. She's actually graduating in 3 months from now, and that is because I asked her, I'm like, why would you speed up and take so many courses? She says, I didn't. I got them all in high school. She was able to, through high school, eliminate a year out of her college education, which for a kid is great, because now you've got an extra year where you don't have to worry about studying, or you can move on to the next level.
And Teddy,
but you save the money. A year of college tuition is so valuable nowadays. So Lowell students really are lucky.
Very much. The student benefits, they get out of school potentially a year early with a degree, and mom and dad benefit because that's a year's worth of college that they didn't have to pay for.
They can ship them off to work. Also, I know you wanted to talk a little bit about a bone marrow drive that's going on in
Yes, Teddy. We have at the 𝗏𝗟𝗇 School a paraprofessional who her name is 𝗏𝗏, and the principal reliably tells me one of the best people on the planet. And but she has leukemia, and we are working with the schools, and we're trying to work on a drive to find a good bone marrow match for 𝗏𝗏. The school is running a drive. It will be on February 25th. That's a week from Tuesday, between 2 p.m. and 6 p.m. at the 𝗏𝗟𝗇 School in Lowell. This information will be available on our website, on our Facebook and social media, so that people can find it there. But it's a really meaningful cause, and we'd love people to show up at the 𝗏𝗟𝗇 School. And even on the social media drive that we'll do, we'll have a QR code that people can simply, they don't have to show up anywhere. They simply register by going on there.
Awesome. Love it. And we'll be happy to share that as well. Liam Skinner, thank you.
Thank
joining
you.
us. A lot of good talk there. I feel like I'm now up to date on everything happening with Lowell Public Schools, and we've only scratched the surface, right?
That's right. Well, we'll have more, right? I'll be back.
You'll be back in about a month from now. Thank you so much.
Pleasure.
Thank you to Lowell School Superintendent Liam Skinner joining us here. Tomorrow, Ray Booten will join us here. We'll talk about what's hot and what's not in the real estate market, but also talk about so many things happening in the city of Lowell. As you know, Ray's a little bit of a political animal, and he loves to get down and dirty. Fascinating Lowell City Council meeting last night, where it was actually revealed that the city has officially entered into the agreement with the United Nations to become the first front-runner city in the United States of America. The contract is signed, sealed, delivered, potentially billions, $2 billion worth of investment in the city of Lowell. We'll talk about that with Ray tomorrow. On Friday, Danielle McFadden, candidate for Lowell School Committee, will be here with us. Got a whole bunch of stuff coming up in the coming weeks. Tune in every day, the Inside Lowell Daily Pulse. It drops at noon, but you can watch it whenever, as we like to say, news, information, and sometimes entertainment on your schedule, not ours. Till next time, everybody stay warm and stay safe.